Audie Murphy was a decorated war hero, a Hollywood star, and a household name. But behind the uniform, behind the camera smile, was a boy shaped by pain, poverty, and heartbreak. While America praised his courage, Hollywood quietly avoided his scars. They hid his breakdowns. They softened his story. But the truth was larger than any script and far more human. Murphy was not just brave in battle, he fought inside his mind, every day. This is the story they did not want you to hear. A past full of pain, a legend built on silence, and a truth too heavy to stay buried. Before we dive into video, subscribe to our channel. Before Audie Murphy became a decorated soldier or a Hollywood icon, he was just a forgotten child in the dry fields of Texas. Born on June 20th, 1925, in a poor farming family in Kingston, Texas, life started rough and never got easier. He was the 7th of 12 children, 12 mouths to feed, and not enough food on the table. His father drifted in and out, finally disappearing for good when Audie was a teenager. His mother, Josie, tried to hold it all together, but poverty had a cruel way of tearing families apart. They lived in shacks, wore second-hand clothes, and had no shoes in summer. Audie worked in cotton fields and did small chores just to bring home scraps. School became a luxury he couldn't afford. He dropped out by the 5th grade so his younger siblings could eat. He learned survival not through books, but through hardship. The greatest blow came when his mother died in 1941. Audie was just 16. She had been his strength, the only softness in a hard world. With her gone, he was completely alone. His younger siblings were placed in orphanages, and Audie was left with nothing but hunger and grief. The boy who had once loved to laugh and sing now carried an emptiness that would never fully leave him. That pain shaped him. That silence taught him how to, endure. He rarely spoke of those years later in life, but those who knew him said the sadness in his eyes never fully went away. Before the battlefield, before the medals, before the cameras, he was already a fighter, not against enemies, but against life itself. And that's what Hollywood never showed. They gave us the hero, but they hid the child. When most boys his age were in school or playing baseball, Audie Murphy was at war, holding a rifle longer than his arm. After his mother died and his siblings were sent away, Audie was left with no future and no fear. America had just entered World War II, and Audie saw the military as his only ticket out of suffering. But he was only 16, too young to enlist legally. So he lied. He adjusted his age on the papers, stood tall though he was still small, and looked the recruiter straight in the eye. Rejected by the Navy and Marines for being underweight and undersized, he finally got accepted into the U.S. Army in 1942. No one knew then, but that skinny Texas kid would become the most decorated American soldier in World War II. He fought across Europe, Italy, France, Germany, through snow, mud, and blood. He saw friends die and chose to keep fighting. He earned 33 military awards, including the Medal of Honor, Bronze Stars, and Silver Stars. But what made his story unforgettable wasn't just the medals, it was his courage. At one point, he climbed onto a burning tank destroyer and held off 200 German soldiers by himself, firing a mounted machine gun for over an hour. He was shot in the leg, soaked in rain, shivering, bleeding, but he refused to leave the fight. That moment alone could have taken his life. Instead, it made him a legend. But the world only saw the hero. They didn't see the boy who didn't sleep anymore. They didn't understand the silence in his smile or why he avoided mirrors. No one asked how he carried so much death in such a young soul. America gave him a flag, a medal, and headlines, but they never asked what it cost him to earn them. When Audie Murphy returned from the war, America greeted him like a hero from a storybook. Newspapers called him a living legend. Parades were held in his honor. His face was suddenly everywhere, on magazines, posters, and television. But inside, Murphy wasn't celebrating. He was still in the trenches, in his mind, fighting battles no one could see. Hollywood came calling fast. He was young, photogenic, and real. Studios said, if he can win the war, he can win the box office. Though he had no formal acting training, producers believed his story could sell tickets, and they were right. Audie made his official film debut in Beyond Glory, 1948, and quickly became a hot name. But it was To Hell and Back, 1955, that changed everything. In it, Murphy played himself, reliving the war that nearly broke him. Fans were amazed by his calm strength. They clapped and cheered as he reenacted heroism. What they didn't know was that every scene was a scar. Filming those battle moments gave him flashbacks, anxiety attacks, and night sweats. He couldn't sleep. He'd relive every explosion, every scream, every moment of fear. In front of the cameras, he performed. Off camera, he fell apart. But Hollywood didn't want that part of the story. Studio press teams polished his image like glass. War hero turned movie star. They didn't mention his growing dependence on sleeping pills. They ignored the panic, the shadows under his eyes, his sudden anger, and long silences. Pain didn't fit in glossy headlines. To the audience, he looked calm and heroic. But inside, Murphy was walking through landmines no one else could see. Hollywood gave him lines, lights, and fame, but never gave him room to heal. They sold his strength, but buried his struggle. And his pain remained off script. Fame gave Audie Murphy a life many dreamed of, but peace was never part of the deal. Far from the camera lenses and Apple. Aus, he lived in the shadows of his own mind. The war had ended, but not for him. It followed him into his home, into his sleep, into every quiet moment when no one was watching. He slept with a handgun under his pillow. He couldn't stand sudden noises or touching crowds. Fireworks made him freeze. At night, he would wake up sweating, fists tight, chest pounding, reaching for weapons that weren't there. Sometimes he didn't even know where he was. Murphy suffered from what we now recognize as post-traumatic stress disorder. Back then, they called it shell shock or nervous trouble and brushed it away. Hollywood didn't want their hero to look weak, wounded, or unstable. And so, for years, Audie wore a mask, smiling for fans, shaking hands, doing interviews, while inside he was exhausted from pretending to be okay. His condition affected his marriage. He had trouble trusting, opening up, or relaxing. He turned to sleeping pills just to rest, and sometimes quietly drank to numb the noise in his head. He tried therapy for a while, but never publicly acknowledged how broken he felt. He feared people would call him crazy. He feared being forgotten or looked down on. Despite his own suffering, he began speaking softly, privately, about the need for better veteran support. He knew soldiers who ended up lost, alone, addicted, even homeless. And in all of them, he saw pieces of himself. But the system wasn't ready to listen. Not then. Behind the spotlight, he wasn't a star or a soldier. He was just a man, trying to survive a war that never truly ended. In the end, Audie Murphy was more than Hollywood ever understood. He had medals, roles, fans, yes. But what truly made him a hero was what he carried in silence. While others clapped for his war bravery or film success, he lived every day with stories too heavy to speak aloud. In 1971, at just 45 years old, Murphy boarded a small private plane on a business trip. It crashed into a mountainside in Virginia. No one survived. The world mourned. Newspapers once again called him a war hero and a Hollywood legend. But those who really knew Audie, they mourned something deeper. Because by the time he died, Audie had become an unofficial voice for struggling veterans. He spoke quietly, meeting with lawmakers, asking for better mental health care for soldiers returning from Vietnam, soldiers like he once was. He didn't do it loudly. There were no cameras, no speeches, just his presence and his pain. He knew what they were going through. He never stopped fighting. For them, and for peace of mind, he never fully found himself. He was buried with full honors at Arlington National Cemetery, just a few steps away from another unknown soldier. On his gravestone, there were no Hollywood titles, no fame-filled words, just the name, rank, and the symbol of a man who had given all he could. Today, we remember Audie Murphy for what he showed the world. But maybe we should also remember him for what he hid, for the bravery it took to smile through pain, to act with a wounded past, and to stand tall while sinking inside. Hollywood sold the shiny version of his life, but the real Audie? He was a quiet warrior, a brother, a survivor. His legacy wasn't just in the roles he played, it was in the battles he never let the world see.